We are going to start our presentation. So we are talking about the South Fork Big Nemaha, and this is our discovery meeting. My name is Deanna Ringenberg. I'm an engineer in the floodplain group of the Department of Natural Resources. All these people listed here are in the floodplain group of the Department of Natural Resources. We have Jamie. Jamie can give us a wave there. She's also an engineer. She does a lot of the review work. She knows a lot about our section. She's a great person to ask questions of. And then Michelle York is an administrative assistant. She probably contacted you to get your information. She sent out emails and reminders about this meeting. And then Mackenzie is the one who's helping with our presentation today. She's great with all this stuff and knows it better than I do. And then I'll have Adele. She's going to do part of the presentation, so I'll have her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Adele Phillips, and I am the flood mitigation planner with the Floodplain Management section. I'll have a little 10-minute section later on in this meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Adele. So I think I'd like you guys to try to unmute and give us a little bit about yourself, just what community you're with, and your name. And then also let us know if there's anyone else in the room with you, if you've invited the mayor or the clerk or just anybody else who's sitting in this presentation. We have a sign-in sheet that we send out to FEMA, so that gives us a record that that person also watched this presentation. So let's start with Eileen.
My name is Eileen Rexroth. I'm the village clerk in Du Bois.
All right. It's Du Bois?
Du Bois.
Okay. We had a little bit of debate earlier. I'm always afraid of butchering these town names.
We're good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the next on my list is Emily Hatcher.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm with the FEMA Region 7 office in Kansas City. I'm the floodplain management specialist that supports the state of Nebraska.
All right, thank you. Now I have Galen Ingle. Galen? Might need to unmute. Looks like you are unmuted. If you can go ahead. Okay. Looks like it's not quite working here. You go ahead and type into the chat. We can get that there. But I think we'll move on. We have Lori Bestian.
Hi, everyone. Laurie Bestian. I'm with FEMA Region 7 out of Kansas City in the floodplain mapping program, and I primarily support the state of Nebraska with Risk MAP.
Cool. Thanks, Lori. Now we have Matt Kuhlman.
Hi, I'm Matt Kuhlman. I'm with the City of Pawnee City, the zoning administrator in the floodplain management.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Then I have Patrick Hartman.
Yeah, I'm Patrick Hartman. I am an engineer with JEO Consulting Group. I helped develop some of the base level engineering that people will probably be talking about today.
And Patrick helped develop the report too, right?
Right.
Perfect. Now I have Robert Carnazzo.
This is Bob Carnazzo. I work with the Nebraska Department of Transportation. I primarily provide certifications for work that we do on the highways. So I'm here listening to see what's going to happen.
Okay. And then it looks like we have Galen. He's the Gage County Highway Superintendent. And then Sarah Jackson.
Hi, I am Sarah Jackson, a hazard mitigation planning specialist for NEMA, Nebraska Emergency Management Agency.
Cool. Thank you very much. And who did I miss? Anybody? And do any of you have someone in your room with you that is joining? I didn't hear anybody. Okay. I'm going to take that silence as a no. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Let's get going. So we're going to start with a little of an overview of the NFIP. Actually, I have a slide here that shows us what we're talking about. We'll start with an overview of the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and Risk MAP. And then we'll talk a little bit about the discovery portion of that and the things that we've gathered during that. And then the important part to us is listening to your guys' input. You guys are the local experts on the flooding there. We just want you guys to let us know if there's anything that we're not capturing in our data. If there's any more that you can give us, just anything, we will 100% look into it. And then we'll have a little discussion about what services that we can help you guys with when you're dealing with your flood risk. And then we'll talk about the next steps in this whole process. So we'll have the NFIP and Risk MAP is our first step. And I have a little video here that I will share my computer sound for. Okay. I'm just going to play it from YouTube so I know it works. And this is a video from FEMA.
It's a very dramatic moment when water begins to enter your house. Certainly something I'll never forget. It rose over a 3-day period to be 32 inches high. It stayed like that for approximately 5 or 6 days. We were taking a boat into the house and checking the water level and measuring it.
Flooding can happen anywhere. And in Houston in 2017, it didn't just happen in high-risk areas. It happened in a lot of lower-risk areas too.
Harvey reinforced a very key statistic. Oftentimes, the homes that flood during these rain events are outside of the 100-year floodplain. So you are not safe and not immune to flooding if you're not in a 100-year or 500-year floodplain. Many of my neighbors that were outside the 500-year floodplain did not quite understand their risk of flooding.
When it came time to return home and clean up, many in Houston didn't have the resources to recover and rebuild.
This is your house, the place where all your children have been raised. You have to get it back. We're a middle-class community. Most of us are not in a position where we have available funding to recover from a major event. It's a tremendous financial burden.
In 1968, Congress created the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. At the time, there weren't many affordable options for private flood insurance, especially for people living in high-risk areas. The government recognized a need for a more affordable program to help communities manage flood risk, no matter their risk level, and help reduce their risk of flooding in the future. Today, FEMA programs like the NFIP help communities and property owners better understand their flood risk and how risk can change. Using flood risk data and maps, communities can decide how to reduce their risk in ways that work best for them.
The rebuilding process really starts with your engagement with flood insurance. Thank goodness we were able to count on that for our recovery. We plan to live in this house for a very long time. We love the community, our families here. This is our home.
Learn more about how the National Flood Insurance Program can help your community understand and reduce risk. Visit FEMA.gov/mitigation.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about Risk MAP. Risk MAP is the whole process of going from initiating the maps all the way to sometimes an effective map. Risk MAP is actually an acronym. It stands for Mapping, Assessment, and Planning. So the mapping is actually the maps that we put out, and then assessment is looking at those maps and seeing where the risk is. And then planning is taking that information and planning your city in a way to reduce that flood risk. Nebraska Department of Natural Resources is a CTP, a cooperating technical partner with FEMA. So we do some of this work with the mapping, and then we send it off to FEMA, who puts it through a review, and then will make it an effective map. We work together for the National Flood Insurance Program. So a floodplain map, the actual map we call a FIRM, which is an acronym. It means Flood Insurance Rate Map. And it's a map that shows where the areas of higher flood risk are. We have multiple names for these flood zones. We call them Special Flood Hazard Areas, or SFHAs. Sometimes we just refer to them as floodplain. And then there are Zone A and Zone AE floodplains and regulatory maps. So these are all just different names for areas with higher flood risk. And these areas all have a 1% chance of flooding in any given year. We used to use the term 100-year flood, but we found that that could be a little misleading to people. People think, oh, it flooded in 2019. I need to wait until 2119 for another flood, I guess. But that's not really how it works. Every year you have the same chance. It's just like pulling the lever of a slot machine. Every time you have the same chance of getting that jackpot. So in these areas, flood insurance is required if you have a federally backed mortgage. And as that video stated, flooding still can and always does, or not always does, but does happen in areas outside of these floodplains. So we sometimes encourage people to get flood insurance when they're outside of the floodplain at a reduced rate. So these are different ways the floodplain maps are used just to assess risk, establish rates for the NFIP flood insurance, and then inform developers, and then equip emergency managers. So this information can be used for emergency managers to decide where a shelter is going to be placed for people displaced by flooding, and to make sure that that would be available to all those people displaced. The reason that we update these maps is because flood risk changes. It can change due to development. If you put a big parking lot in that area, now a lot of that water is going to run off the parking lot instead of being absorbed by the land. It can change because rivers move. We saw this in 2019 in the Elkhorn. The channel changed quite a bit. And then things like dams or any structures in the river can change the flooding risk. Another reason that we update these maps is because our LIDAR information, which we use for elevation maps, that's much better than it used to be. And so these maps weren't updated since 2005. And now in 2011, we had new LIDAR data. So it's much more precise. If you can see in this map, here's our older map. And then with the new system, it's just a lot more defined. It goes up these channels, up the roads like you would see where the roads are a local low point, and the flood waters just move up them. So they're a little bit more accurate and depict what would naturally happen. Okay, next we have a poll. So get ready. And answer this one honestly. I'm going to show you how to access the maps at the end of this presentation. So if you answer, I don't know how, you're in luck because I'll show you. Okay. So it looks like a lot of you said monthly, yearly. And that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. I'm sure you don't need it every day or once a week at a lot of these places. So that's great. I'm glad that you guys know how to use them. Okay, moving on. So within the risk map, the first step is this discovery. And really what happens is we want to talk to you guys to find out what kind of flooding experience you have, what events you've seen. And then we want to gather any data that we can. That could be high water marks, that could be survey, that could be new development that you have coming in. And then even like photos of flooding we can look at. And we just want to get as much information that we can in order to make the best maps that we can. And then we will talk a little bit about how this work can help reduce your flood risk. We'll talk about what the DNR can help you with. So we'll get into kind of more specifically about this discovery process, the things that we've gathered. It's a big old list. I won't go through it all. A lot of this is in that discovery report that we sent out. The biggest thing is the LIDAR data. And that's the biggest thing that is new that will help inform how we make the maps. And I'll talk about LIDAR a little bit later. Another big thing that's come out of this is that base level engineering. So we've conducted initial base level engineering, or BLE, for your community. And I'll go through those maps and show you how to find them. And I'll go over BLE right here. So BLE is base level engineering. It's a really wide scale. We do it on the whole watershed level. So this whole watershed, we run it. And we use LIDAR, which is flown by an airplane. And the airplane actually puts like a laser out, and that gives us the elevation of the land. It's a lot more refined than any way that we've had before for elevation. And in Nebraska, usually this BLE is what goes on to create the Zone A floodplain boundaries. So what we see won't, it has a tendency to change, but it won't change that much from what you see when we look at the maps. Discovery reports, I sent those out on February 4th. That link that I sent out will last for 30 days, which means that you have until Friday to click on it and provide comments. So please, if you haven't looked at it, provide comments. If after this meeting you realize something and you want to provide more comments, let us know and we'll incorporate those into the report. It goes through all the information that we've gathered up to this point. We sent out surveys with that. So here's the communities that I've received surveys from. If you want to send, if you have someone else that wants to be a survey, if you don't see your community on this list, I can sure send that out. And if you could get that back to us quickly, that would be amazing. And we will include it in the report. Okay, I've got another poll coming up. What is BLE? These are kind of long sentences. Oh my gosh, you guys are geniuses. You got it. Great. All right, yeah, so BLE is that mapping that's used to create the boundaries. It can be changed, it's not final. And it's just a representation of what that 1% annual chance floodplain will look like. All right, cool. So now I'm going to switch it off to Adele. She's going to talk about this section of the presentation.
Hello, everyone. As Deanna mentioned, she's talking a lot about the mapping, and I'm here to talk about the sort of additional services that the floodplain management section of DNR can provide to your community. My background is land use planning. Before working for the state, I used to review conditional use permits, building permits, floodplain development permits for compliance with local regulations and vet them for their environmental impacts. So I know what it's like to work at the community level with property owners and project proponents. Now with the state, I get to help you implement your NFIP programs and implement these local ordinances that we all have. So next slide, please, Deanna. We know that flooding it's a known fact that flooding occurs. We know that floodplains are inherently hazardous. We know that flooding is actually the most frequently reported hazard in the state of Nebraska. We know that in the life of a 30-year mortgage, a home in the floodplain has better than 1 in 4 chance of experiencing flooding. And we also know Nebraska is going to get wetter, that our storms are going to increase in frequency, intensity, and decrease in our predictability. So that information, given with the maps that are being developed, communities are poised to make very informed decisions to keep community members safe and protect property, as well as protect the natural floodplain functions. And next slide, please. So the ways in which we do these, we protect property, floodplain functions, and lives is through implementing mitigation measures. In future meetings, I'll be presenting to you the more details on the various mitigation measures that your community can implement. Right here, we have a series of raindrops that have the approximate categories of the different types of ways you can mitigate. Next slide, please. So with regards to the services that DNR can provide you, in terms of engineering, if you need a determination as to where the base flood elevation is in a zone A, we can do that for you. We have an interactive map that Deanna is going to walk you through. That's an online portal where you can request base flood elevation determinations of our engineering staff. We can also provide you something called real-time technical assistance. That's where, given models and discrete areas of the model, we can determine whether upsizing a culvert or something like that will reduce localized flooding. We can help you in terms of training your coworkers and others as to how to incorporate this risk data into your local planning decisions. If you get applications for letters of map revision or additional other engineering analysis submitted to your office, and you don't have the expertise within your office or in-house to evaluate that engineering analysis, we can do that for you as a service to communities. It's important to note that what we cannot do is design. We can't design solutions or development for a jurisdiction or a project proponent. We can evaluate the engineering behind it. Next slide, please. So with regard to reducing your flood risk, these maps and our services will help you identify where flooding poses the most risk to people and property. And thankfully, we, Department of Natural Resources, as well as Nebraska Emergency Management Agency, are able to work with you to implement mitigation measures. We help administer funds that can support the removal of structures from flood hazard areas or the elevation of structures in flood hazard areas. Again, we'll present more information about various funding resources in future meetings. Every 5 years, communities are required to update their multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plans. We review those plans and comment on them, and we also participate in some of the meetings that lead to their development. It's important for communities to realize that the development of these plans is a great opportunity for emergency managers as well as floodplain administrators to work together to identify and prioritize mitigation measures, and then leverage them for financial support so that you can actually implement them. Next slide, please. We also provide information on flood insurance. Some of you may have heard of the CRS, or Community Rating System. This is a program where flood insurance holders receive a reduced rate or reduced cost in flood insurance as a result of their local jurisdiction reporting on the many mitigation measures that they have implemented. We can help you get enrolled into that program, and we can also help you in identifying points, which then as you accrue points, or how CRS works is that as you accrue points, then your the flood insurance policy holders within your jurisdiction enjoy reduced flood insurance rates. There's a lot of things that the state does that a local jurisdiction can get points for. On April 15th, actually, we are going to be, DNR is going to be co-hosting a flood insurance training regarding FEMA's new Risk Rating 2.0 program, by the way. Next slide, please. And then on a day-to-day floodplain management activity or practice, we are here to help you. We field calls all the time regarding how to appropriately interpret floodplain management ordinances and understand how those regulations interact with certain development proposals. And with your new maps, there's an obligation to update your floodplain management ordinances. We review your ordinances for you, and we can guide you on that process. We can also help you should unpermitted development come to light. We can help you understand how to enforce your regulation so that development that has occurred can be retroactively permitted or brought into compliance with your local ordinance. One thing we've just released is actually a new substantial damage assessment handbook. We released it yesterday. We developed one in 2019 in response to that flooding. Now we've done an updated version, which is full of guidance for sunny day activities or things you can do prior to a disaster occurring, as well as step-by-step guidance as to the appropriate procedures to implement after a disaster has occurred. This is not just flood hazard. This is for any disaster that impacts a structure within your special flood hazard area. That includes tornadoes, fires, you name it. So this is really important guidance. It's now available on our website. We are also doing a training on substantial damage assessment on March 18th from 1 to 3 p.m. So coming right up. And then the next slide, I guess, moving on. I'd like to know what services you have utilized from DNR. Please check any that you have utilized. This will be important information for us.
Is anyone else only able to select one item in the poll? I see. Okay. Yeah, looks like people are having that problem.
How about, would anyone like to volunteer? Just unmute themselves and say what resources or services they've appreciated from DNR. Okay, thanks. I guess we saw the results, but we know now they are not a good sample or study. I really do hope that everyone receives and opens the email notifications that we send out through a system called GovDelivery. This is our primary mechanism for alerting you to our trainings. That typically we have a training on the third Thursday every month this year. It's also how we release our quarterly newsletters, which always have a broad range of information in them. And then it's how we send out other additional resources that come to light. Region 7 information, as well as trainings in our adjacent states in Region 7. Any information that we think would be useful to our floodplain administrators, we put out through this email notification system. So if you have any questions about accessing it, just get in touch. All right, well, with that, I'll pass it back to Deanna, and thank you everyone for your time today.
All right, thanks, Adele. Now we're going to get into the maps. As we're looking at the maps, I kind of want you guys to think about looking at them and letting us know where you've experienced significant flooding, kind of where the maps either don't portray the flood risk as accurately, either we've included an area or not included in the area. Let us know if there's any areas that have repeated flood loss. And then this LIDAR elevation data that we're working off of was flown in 2011. So if you have any big development since 2011, like a big shopping center or housing development or anything like that, let us know about it and we will look into it. And then if you have any new development that you're looking to plan, and then just also looking at it and thinking about areas where there's been flooding or flooding control, like culverts or anything like that, dams. And also, as you're looking at the maps, please check your community boundaries and ETJs. Those go on our flood insurance rate maps, so we like those to be accurate. All right, I will show you how to access the maps, but it sounds like a lot of you know how, so I will do it anyway, just in case. So to get to the maps, go to dnr.nebraska.gov. And you should see the Capitol building with the fountain. And if anybody's on a computer, feel free to play along. We can all get to the maps. So once you see the fountain, you scroll down to Floodplain Management and click on that tile. And then scroll down again to the interactive maps and then Floodplain Interactive Map. And we'd like you guys not to save this link as like a bookmark, just because every once in a while that changes or it hosts in a different place, and we update it. So I always like people to go through, you can maybe save this spot, but try not to save this link because it might change. So hit agree and continue. These hashed lines are areas where we have studies. South Fork Big Nemaha is this one that I think looks like the top half of a llama. If you have another interpretation, I'd love to hear it, but I see top half of a llama. I'm going to scroll into Pawnee City. When you first open the map, you have different layers. So you go to this area here that looks like a sandwich, and that'll give you the different kind of like layers of a sandwich. For our purposes today, I have BFE turned on. I'll show you that later, but I'm going to turn it off right now. I am going to keep the Nemaha Flood Awareness Area. So that's what we've talked about earlier. That's your BLE. So these are the maps, and they're probably going to change a little bit, but they're pretty close to what the effective maps could be. Now, that being said, the effective maps for this project have not fully been funded by FEMA. We expect that they probably will be, but there is a chance that out of this project, we don't actually have effective maps. They likely will be. So I'm going to turn all these guys off and just leave the National Flood Hazard layer. So that is the layer that's your current regulatory maps. These are what you should be using to regulate your floodplains to. And here we are in Pawnee City. If I zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see how the boundary has changed a little bit. I'll turn off the flood hazard layer. So these new maps, because we have this more accurate data from the LIDAR, they're a little bit more like rugged. They have edges that are a little bit more natural than what the effective one is. And that's just because we have this better data. You can see here, there's like a berm around these tanks, and that's been excluded. We also have this orange color, and that area is what we call the 0.2% annual chance or 500-year flood. So that area is not the regulatory map. For example, if this house had a federally backed mortgage, they are not, you can see my cursor, right? Okay, good. If this house had a federally backed mortgage, they would not be required to have flood insurance because they are in the 500-year flood. But it would be something that we would recommend because that means that it could be susceptible to a larger flood. Also in this map, we have BFE determinations, and you can turn that on. So the city of Pawnee City has a valid BFE. I can click on that and view the BFE, and it will take me to the BFE. Some of these functionalities aren't quite working. You can view a BFE2 as well here from this and put in your section township range. But yep, so I'm going to go back to that layers and turn that off. One thing that we really want you to turn on, and you might want to write these down. So really want you to turn on the community boundaries and check to see if that ETJ is what you expect it to be. So you can see here's the corporate boundary, the city boundary. And then if I zoom out, you can see the whole ETJ. And let us know if that's something that you're planning on changing in the future, because it would be easier for us just to make that change as soon as we could for our mapping purposes. Also in this, we have a comments place. So if you see a section that you think, oh, it always floods here, you can make a comment. I'm going to turn off my community boundaries. So you have to turn on this floodplain boundary community comments, floodplain boundary review comments, sorry. And then go to this tab here. And you can actually create a boundary. So if you're like, oh, this guy's lot always floods. So then I can draw a square around it, double click to end. And then I can put in my name and my comment, you know, I don't know, this area floods. And then I would hit save, and that would save that comment. We also have a how-to on this that we'll send out. So yeah, I encourage you guys in the next week, it's kind of your homework from this presentation, to go in and look at your communities and see kind of how things have changed. Here's Du Bois. So here's the old National Flood Hazard Area. Yeah, you guys don't have maps, like you said. So here's that that new map. Anyway, does anyone have any questions on that? Anything I missed? Okay. So we will move on.
If I make a comment on the map, will somebody else see my comment?
That's a good question.
So it will be viewable to other people, so they can see that there was a comment there, but there should not be any connection to the person who added the comment. All of that is wiped away. It's just that the comment shows, the polygon shows a yellowed area that there's a comment there, but it should not be viewable to anyone. There's a database on our side that we can pull the comment in and then reach out to you, which is why we need a name tied to it so that we can reach out to the people who have provided comments.
And if
Sorry, Deanna, I should have informed you of that before the meeting.
No, that's good. That's good information to know. If you're not comfortable with that, or if that's not working out for you, or your internet's slow or whatever, you can always send us an email or call us or even a letter. We will answer and look into everything you send us. And the big part with this is that these maps are still in our hands. We can still edit them if we need to. Any comment that you provide us, we will look into, and it is free to comment. We have to use like engineering analyses to back up all of our maps. So we will look into it. We might not necessarily take that comment, but it's really important to make it clear that after these become regulatory, you would have to pay an engineering firm and go through a formal process with FEMA to change these. So it's important that you guys look at them right now and give us any comments while it's free. We have a whole group of professional engineers who will look into this for you. So use our services, please. Okay, so we're back here. Just take a look at those maps. Keep these things in mind. Going forward, here is the timeline for the project. So we are in this early discovery phase. We're just at the end of it. We're going to head into data and product development very soon. That next meeting will be pretty quick. Adele kind of referred to it a little bit, that we'll go into some things in a little bit more in depth. And then we'll have a draft map. And then here's where things switch. We do these kinds of things on a watershed wide level. And then this is where it kind of switches to a county level. And there'll be a formal review. And then finally, at the end of this, if it's funded by FEMA, we will have effective maps. This whole thing takes like 5 to 7 years. And it's a pretty long process, and we'll have multiple meetings throughout to keep you guys informed of where we're at. So going forward, go ahead and look at those maps. Let us know if you have any comments. Also, the things I mentioned before, additional data. We're looking for high water marks, any survey that's been done near the river, development since 2011, plan development, and then look at those ETJ boundaries. And if you have any photos of flooding, we'd love to take a look at those. If you send us a photo, it would also be really nice if you could send us a release saying that we could use the photo. But if you don't have that information, that's okay too. We just won't be able to use it in an official setting. And then let us know if you have any help with any mitigation things that Adele talked about. We will eventually have a story map for this watershed. We don't have it right now, but here's one we have for the West Fork Big Blue watershed. And this is like where having your guys' photos would be lovely, because we like to use the photos from the watershed, and we're kind of lacking in this area. So if you have a photo and you have the rights to use that photo, send that to us. So here we have like discovery and different tabs about where we are in the process, and we'll have updates. They're pretty cool little things. Jamie spent a lot of time on them. They look really nice. So we will have a meeting coming up pretty soon where we'll talk about flood risk data and get into that stuff a little bit more. Those are kind of some cool little maps that come out of this whole process that can help you guys with your community and help plan flood risk. I think they're cool, at least. So the big thing is, now is the time to let us know anything that you think might be helpful. We love hearing feedback. So just, even if you're not even sure if we would need it, let us know and see how we can incorporate it. And we'll look into it, if we're able to incorporate it. And this really means that it'll save your community money. Even if, after this meeting, you want to take these maps to the city council or take these maps to the mayor and, see if there's anything that comes out of that, you're welcome to share that. You're welcome to share this presentation. Please gather all the information you can. That discovery report, like I said, that link will expire by the end of this week. So if you have any comments about the discovery report, please do that soon. So our next steps are to go into the map and make it as accurate as possible. We like to fine tune our maps within town. So we'll really take a close look at those. One of our engineers will look at those. And then we'll finalize a discovery report that will include information from this meeting. And we'll keep you updated with emails and get that story map going. And then we'll keep developing your floodplain and work on flood risk products. Like those are those cool little things that we'll talk about in a future meeting. Okay, questions? It's a lot of information.
Deanna, we're gonna go ahead and run that last poll again because Michelle was able to fix it so you guys can select all that apply. So I'm just gonna go ahead and run that.
Awesome.
So you guys should be able to select multiple ones now.
Okay. So it looks like you guys are doing BFE's permitting review, reading the newsletter. Adele, did you want to talk to that at all, or?
If you have the website handy, you could show them that green bar that they can navigate to, just to sign up and get others to sign up.
The green bar?
At the bottom of our floodplain management section websites. I think even if you scroll at the bottom of this page, possibly.
Oh,
Yeah, get email and text updates. If you want to hear from us, then go through this enrollment.
all right. Cool.
And again, there is going to be a training on substantial damage assessment on March 18th. It's a 2-hour class from 1 to 3 p.m.
Our trainings are free. Yes.
Yes, our trainings are free and available virtually.
Awesome.
And we are recording them and then making them available later on the DNR YouTube channel.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? You can put it in the chat. You can unmute yourself. You can also just send me an email afterwards if that's handier to you. Here's our information. Please don't hesitate to call if you have an answer or a question or an email.
I do have a couple questions.
Awesome.
The first one is, I've been told that I am not in a floodplain. So A, should I even be involved in this? And B, I've been told because I'm not in a floodplain that I'm not eligible for National Flood Insurance Plan.
Jamie, do you know anything about Du Bois?
So it looks like you guys were previously unmapped,
Yeah,
maybe.
that's what I'm seeing
So
here.
this project is going to be tied to Johnson County, I believe. So the entire county would get new maps if we're able to get those funded. I would say it's still important for you to stay involved during the data development. So the phase that we have funded till we get to that flood risk review meeting. So we'll have a kickoff meeting, and then the end of engineering, we have a flood risk review meeting. And the reason I say it's important for you to stay involved and in the loop is because we are going to have maps that come from that. And worst case scenario, you're going to have some updated information that you can choose to use or not.
Okay.
We'll have best available data is what we would call it, that will be better than what was there before, because it'll be based on more accurate topography.
Okay, great.
Ground elevations. So we would still encourage you to participate. And then once we break off into that county mapping effort, that would be maybe where, if you're not within the county being mapped, it might not make as much sense for you to be included.
It looks
Okay, now, what about my question about the flood insurance? Is it true what they told me, that because I'm not in a floodplain, I don't qualify for the national insurance?
So it looks like there's the National Flood Hazard Layer actually shows that it looks like there is a small amount of floodplain within your community. I don't know exactly where the community boundary is, but
it's outside of the community boundary.
Oh, it's showing within for us. So we must have your boundary wrong.
Yeah, it's not within the city limits of Du Bois. You got to remember, we're only 140 people.
Right.
We're very little.
Yeah, I'm from a small town too, so I completely understand that part. If you have SFHA within your jurisdiction, you should have access to NFIP. We have different letters that we'll have to send out depending on what that status is. So I think the most important thing for us right now is for you to review your community boundary to make sure that we have it right, so that you get the right letter when we get to that phase. And I will have to look into, or maybe Lori Bestian can answer the question on whether a community that has no special flood hazard area can participate in the NFIP. I thought that you could, but I might be wrong.
Okay, thank you.
So I was actually just looking at the community status book. Let's see, this is Du Bois, to see if you are participating in the NFIP as an NSFH, well, as an unmapped community. And I'm not seeing that. Emily, do you have any more information on Du Bois on your end in terms of ability to purchase flood insurance?
I'm looking up right now their status. A community can participate in the NFIP even if they don't have a special flood hazard area. They would just be marked as an SFHA, and they could still participate. And the citizens would still be able to purchase flood insurance. It would just be at a significantly cheaper rate if they're not in the floodplain, but they still want to buy it. But I'm looking right now to see what their status is.
I pulled it up, and unless I'm looking at
You
it
didn't see
wrong,
him?
I don't see Du Bois as a participant in the NFIP. So that's something that, as a community, you could consider joining.
Yeah, I also see it says not participating and never mapped. So, but yeah, you could still join. I would obviously, like Jamie said, kind of see how the mapping project goes.
Now, there's been no boundary changes. I've been here for 10 years. There's been no boundary changes. And to my understanding, there's been no boundary changes for beaucoup years. So for me to look at this map and read it and try to change the boundary, because I do know that what little bit is in a possible floodplain is outside of the village limits, would be most next to impossible. So what would I need to do to be able to handle that request?
So what we ask communities to do, the boundaries that we use are what we consider the best that are available to us, but we are not the home for community boundaries. Those are all defined by a community and the different parcels that you've annexed through the years. So you would have some map in your community that would say, this is our official boundary, but DNR doesn't have access to any of those maps, and there's no state agency that has a repository of that information. So we always ask the communities to verify that the boundary that we're using matches what your files show. And if they don't match, then I just need you to tell me where it's wrong so that I can fix it on our maps so that our boundary matches what is actually on file and matches your official community boundary. Does that make sense?
It does. However, that, as to my knowledge, that information does not exist.
Okay. Okay, so
because it's very
trickier.
It's down in the basement somewhere.
Well, luckily it's not in a floodplain, so hopefully it wasn't a flooded basement.
Yeah, right.
We'll have to do some digging and see if maybe there's one agency that we've been able to work with in the past that does have some of that information. So we'll do a little digging on our end and see if we can find anything. If you're able to find anything, that's really the best case. But
yeah, I will look and see if I can find anything.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And so this is Laurie. I was just going to ask someone at DNR if the community is interested in joining the NFIP as an unmapped community. Would they contact Chuck Chase? Is that probably there?
Yeah, and when we get into that data development phase toward the tail end, as we're scheduling that flood risk review meeting, we're reaching out to non-participating communities to have that conversation no matter what. Even if the community has not expressed any interest in participating, we want to give them the information so they can make an informed decision at that time, especially because we'll have updated floodplain boundaries. So if their flood risk has changed, they can make that decision. But yes, Chuck is usually the person who's doing that outreach for us. We have a few new people on our team that might be helping with that effort, like Elijah Kaufman.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, those are great questions. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add? Again, we're always available if something comes up that you think of. But otherwise, thanks for coming. Does anybody else have anything to add? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, have a good day, and hopefully we'll see you guys in person sometime. All right. Bye.